which is one of the capacity building and business development tools that UNABSEC uses to provide her members and other industry players with key information, skills, and knowledge relevant to their day-to-day running of their businesses. As we may all be aware, in our 30th anniversary celebration that we had last December, we did launch a new brand name for UNABSEC, which is UNABSEC with the S, not UNABSEC with a C. And UNABSEC with a S is Uganda National Association of Builders, Suppliers, and Engineering Contractors. And we are transiting from Uganda National Association of Building and Civil Engineering Contractors. We did this in a bid to make the organization inclusive of all stakeholders in the construction contracting sector. We pride in our current number of 442, and UNABSEC keeps on spreading the wings with tailored services to her members. We all know that the government of Uganda is our biggest employer, and to be able to do work with any a public procurement process, which we all know is regulated by PPDA that we have today on this call to take us through the new guidelines that were launched in January. Over the years, as part of our mandate, UNABSEC has had lobby engagements with government, several lobby engagements with government through PPDA on several improvements in procurement processes, which I envisage that if implemented by different procurement entities would address issues affecting the participation of Ugandan contractors in public procurement. We all know that most contractors, especially the national contractors, have been grappling and still grapple with unfair competition in procurement of works, since a number of them are struggling to absorb economic shocks, unlike their foreign counterparts who are state-backed, and they usually leverage on the subsequent vacuum created to continue dominating our industry. We all know that unrealistic bid qualification requirements, expensive bid securities, and rampant requests for extension of bid security validity periods, among others, have been our major concern, which usually increase our cost of doing business. I'm glad to note that effective 5th February, some of the challenges that the construction sector faced became issues of the past. A turning point emerged on 25th January 2024, as our moderator highlighted, where we had PPDA launch the regulations 2023 and the guidelines 2024. These are new regulations, and these new regulations and guidelines incorporate a number of proposals that the association presented to PPDA during our several advocacy engagements that were all aimed at improving the bidding processes. In light of the above development, with the partnering with PPDA, we came up with this idea of having a webinar today. And our topic is the impact of PPDA regulations 2023 and guidelines 2024 on construction business. And this is to ensure that we sensitize the construction industry players about the major provisions in the new regulations and guidelines and how they really impact on their businesses. We all know that information is power. If you don't know what is available around you, you're not able to actually leverage on it. We have our guest speaker, Ms. Sheila Nachuara. We welcome you from PPDA, who will be taking us through this topic, highlighting the crucial amendments that construction business owners need to know. I take this opportunity to appreciate PPDA, the board and its management for their consideration of our proposals to the procurement regulations and guidelines, particularly Guideline 3 of 2024, which is on bid and performance securities, which we believe will be a turnaround to the local construction industry. We appreciate them too for coming through to join us today in our quest to build capacity for local contractors and promote their participation in public procurement. As an association, we believe that by the end of this session, participants online, both our members and non-members, because we believe all of us in the construction industry who do business in this space have been able to log on, and we believe that the session will equip you with key tips and knowledge that will help you to streamline your procurement processes and be able to submit winning bids to the standards of these new regulations. I wish you a very fruitful webinar to every one of us here, and stay blessed. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much, Madam Edie. That was very, very insightful. And I'd like to commend you for keeping time. I would like to invite our next speaker, who happens to also be our guest speaker of the day, Ms. Sheila Nachiwala, who will be representing Mr. Benson Turamye, the ED of PPDA, to give us some insights on these new regulations and how they'll affect our businesses, especially the construction businesses. I'm sure all of us have a thing or two to say about them, but for the most part, we are thankful. And as Madam Edie has said, UNAPSEC played a very big role in the input of these regulations. And with that, we are proud. We are proud to say that at least in the area of lobbying and advocacy, we are doing very well. So we've been able to note a few things from the new regulations. I've noted that we are no longer, aggregate bidders will no longer appeal to PPDA, but rather to the accounting officers. Then we have a cap of 10 days within which the procurement unit should make a decision, and several other changes. We've seen one regulation from the 2021 regulations being dropped or revoked, and we saw four of them being retained while 7 were amended. Now, these are the things we want to talk about. Ms. Sheila Nachiwala, you're very welcome. Oh, yeah. You're very, very welcome, and we are very eager to hear from you and see how these are going to affect our businesses. I hope you are ready. I'm giving you the floor right now. Ms. Sheila.
Thank you so much, Miriam. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Very well.
You can hear me. Okay. Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you so much, Madam Edie. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen on the call, all protocol observed. My name is Sheila Nachiwala. I work as a Senior Officer Legal Affairs at PPDA. I bring you greetings from my Executive Director, Canon Benson Turamye, who is unable to facilitate on this webinar because of other conflicting engagements. He had an engagement with the board that he could not get out of. But worry not, me that he has sent, I assure you that I'll ably represent. I've been with PPDA for a couple of years, so I've been through the various cycles of amendment of the laws that Miriam mentioned earlier. So during this session, I'm going to take you through a number of amendments that have happened to the regulations and the guidelines, and we shall see how they're going to impact your businesses in construction, supplies, and we see how this is going to affect you as you're participating in bidding as we are participating in these procurements. We're going to see the different number of regulations. Miriam, you were mentioning one regulation that was dropped, some that were revised, new ones that were introduced. We are going to look at all that. According to the program, I've been given one hour starting now. So let me get into it. Miriam, confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, Miss Sheila, we can see your screen and your audio is very, very, very good. Please proceed.
Okay, so this is how my presentation is going to run. We are going to have an introduction and background. We are going to look at the objectives of amendments to the PPDA regulations. We are going to look at the PPDA regulations themselves, and then highlights in the guidelines. So Miriam, like you mentioned earlier, the Act has gone through a number of amendments. It first came into force in 2003, and that is why we refer to it as the PPDA Act 2003, even after going through these various amendments. In 2003 is when the authority, Public Procurement and Disposal Public Assets Authority, was also established under that PPDA Act of 2003 as the principal regulator of public procurement in Uganda. As PPDA, we do not do the procurements, but procurements are decentralized to the different PDEs, the procuring and disposing entities, the ministries, the commissions, the schools, the district local governments, the hospitals, any government entity that you could think of does its own procurements, and then we come in to regulate, to monitor, to advise, to make sure that they are doing the procurements in accordance with the provisions of the PPDA Act. We do not carry out procurements. So we had a first amendment of the Act in 2011, and that came into force on 3rd March 2014. And then the most recent amendment of the PPDA Act was in 2021, and it came into force on the first day of July 2021. So this recent amendment necessitated, with all these amendments that have been going on, in 2014, the regulations were amended and they became regulations of 2014. Even with 2021, the regulations had to be amended. I must apologize, it has taken some time from 2021 up to 2024 when the regulations have come out. But we lost some time, as you know, during those years of 2021 and 2022. 2020 and 2021, there was that COVID issue, so there was some interruption as we were developing the regulations. But finally, they've come on board, and we are going to be able to see how they are affecting us in the sector. So briefly, I'll take you through some areas of the 2021 amendment of the Act. We still refer to it as the PPDA Act of 2003 because we haven't completely overhauled it. We've just been changing things here and there. Miriam, you mentioned the reduction of the actors in the administrative review process when you said that we no longer submit complaints to PPDA. Now, when you are lodging a complaint, when you have an administrative review as a bidder, when you're not satisfied with the process, the best evaluated bidder notice has come out, and it is displayed that you did not submit powers of attorney as the ground for your failure. You can lodge an administrative review with the accounting officer of that entity. Before, when you were dissatisfied at accounting officer level, you could appeal to PPDA. Now, with the amendment of the Act, when you're dissatisfied with the accounting officer, you appeal to the PPDA Appeals Tribunal straight away. Before, you could only go to the tribunal after being dissatisfied with the PPDA decision. Now, PPDA is no longer in the administrative review process. When you're dissatisfied at accounting officer level, you go to the tribunal. So we've reduced the actors in the administrative review process. And all this is in a bid to improve efficiency. Because I know you as business people, you're interested in getting business. But as the government entities, as PPDA, we are interested in service delivery. So we wanted to see a reduction in these players in the complaints mechanism, so that once an administrative review is lodged, the whole process is halted until the administrative review process is ended. So when PPDA is removed, at least now there are fewer players. We arrive at a decision much faster, and then the process can be able to proceed, and we have service delivery. I know as a bidder, you'd be interested in fighting so that you get the business. But as government, we want to make sure that these procurements move so that we get the intended benefit. So we have that as an amendment in the Act. Later, we are going to look at the regulations and what they provide for in line with administrative review and what you need to know in light of that change. With the amendment of the Act, we now have provision for special interest groups under reservation schemes. This was a creature of Section 61A in the PPDA Act that now provides for sustainable procurement. So sustainable procurement takes into consideration these social issues of reserving certain procurements for certain groups. Who are these special interest groups? We are looking at youth, the women, and persons with disabilities. There's a separate guideline clearly detailing what is reserved for who. And then, of course, I'm sure you are aware of the guideline to promote local content, which has the thresholds for reservation of certain categories of procurements. You'll be able to give me feedback whether it's working or not, but later I'll be able to take you through those thresholds that are reserved for us as local providers within the Ugandan context. The ones that Miss Elizabeth was talking about that are disadvantaged because they do not have the backing of their governments compared to their counterparts. We are saying, okay, what do we do? At least let's reserve some procurements for these Ugandan providers, and we're going to see which categories are reserved. We have incorporation of sustainable procurement. I mentioned that earlier. In the Act, there's clarity on the strategic role of Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development in the procurement and disposal function. So Ministry of Finance has to come in to give policy guidance in procurement and disposal. As PPDA, we fall under Ministry of Finance. They are our mother ministry. Even amendment of this Act, amendment of the regulations, the guidelines, all has to be done in collaboration with the ministry so that it is in line with the policies that are envisaged by the ministry. We have provision for the electronic records and communication. Providers on the call of people, bidders who have been able to participate in procurement. I'm sure you've heard of electronic government procurement. It is a system that has now so far been rolled out to all the ministries. And pretty soon, in the beginning of the next financial year, the remaining 250 entities are going to be enrolled onto the EGP system. I hope you are already registered on the EGP system, because if you're not, then in the future you'll not be able to participate in public procurement. So the Act had to be amended to provide for this sort of electronic communication, because before everything was manual, everything was physical. You had to submit paper bids, you had to submit them physically. Now we are saying you can submit electronically, and the communication can be electronic. The Act also amended the KCCA Act, the Local Government Act in regard to procurement and disposal, and also repealed some provisions in the Local Governments Act. So these are some of the key areas. Amendment of the PPDA Act, which then culminated into amendment of the regulations. And what were the objectives for the amendments of the regulations? First, it was to harmonize these regulations. Previously, members who were on the call, I'm sure if you had ever participated in local government and then in central government, you would note that the two entities, the two categories of entities, were using different regulations. That is the regulation that Miriam was talking about, that one regulation was dropped. So the local government PPDA regulations of 2006 were dropped, and now both categories of entities, the central government, then the local governments, that is the districts, the cities, the municipalities, we are all one government, and we shall all be using one set of PPDA regulations that were launched. Then the other objective, of course, was to operationalize the provisions of the PPDA Amendment Act, because, of course, the Act was talking about sustainable procurement, was talking about removing PPDA from the administrative review tier. So now we had to bring the regulations in line with what the Act had amended. So the regulations had to be amended to achieve that objective. To create efficiency in the procurement process, that was another objective for amendment of the regulations. And this was through reduction of procurement lead times. Miriam also mentioned that 10 days for decisions of the entities. Contracts committee has 10 days within which now to make a decision. Before, this was not regulated. So you find an entity spends 3 months without a decision coming out. We've reduced the timelines for evaluation. We've reduced the timelines for bidding. All this is in light to create efficiency, because efficiency is not just how well you do something, but also how long you take for it to be done. So it was important that we amend the regulations to have this efficiency, because there are many stakeholders. The president himself was always complaining about the procurement process delaying, even new bidders, the providers. You're always saying the procurement process is too long. So in a bid to try and reduce this, we regulated some of these timelines in the regulations, and we're going to see particularly those that concern you as providers to these entities. Then the other objectives was to promote the use of procurement as a socio-economic tool through sustainable procurement, which is premised on economy, social, and environment aspects. Then to simplify procurement and reduce the cost of doing business without compromising quality. Madam Edie already mentioned guideline number 3 on bid and performance securities. That one, most of the revisions were simply to reduce the cost of doing business, and it is beneficial to you as members of this August House. I want to move on to now the regulations themselves. You can see I've indicated the ones which are new and the ones that have been revised. The PPDA procurement planning regulations, those ones may not concern you. They're for planning within the entities. What may concern you there is that this plan has to be displayed. So you may be able to view this entity's plan and be able to prepare yourself in particular procurements that you may be interested in as a bidder to be able to do business with that particular entity, with a government entity. For the entities that are already on the electronic government procurement system, you are able to view these plans all year round, compared to those that are not yet on the system, where you have to go to either their notice board or their website or the PPDA website or the government procurement portal, but it's a requirement that they publish these plans so that you're able to see and be able to prepare yourselves on where you can participate in. These provisions were originally embedded in other regulations, but were pulled out. Now they are independent as planning regulations. The other new regulation is the PPDA negotiation regulations of 2023 still. You may be aware that before, negotiations were prohibited by Section 74 of the PPDA Act, except where it was a procurement, where it was direct procurement, or if it was a procurement for consultancy services. But now with the amendment of the PPDA Act, negotiations were allowed where the best evaluated bidder price exceeds the budget of the entity, but you can only negotiate to reduce the scope. So these regulations are coming out clearly on what you can negotiate on, and you're going to see highlights in those regulations as well. The PPDA procuring and disposing entities regulations 2023, these were revised. They were in existence, but they were revised. These may also not concern you so much. They are to do with the administration of these entities, the institutional setup, who is supposed to be on contracts committee, what does the accounting officer do, what does contracts committee do, what does the evaluation committee do. So that is found within the PDE regulations. These regulations are all available on our PPDA website. You can interest yourself and download and look and read and see. Then we have the PPDA evaluation regulations 2023. This may concern you a bit. You need to know what would be evaluated and where it would be put. Otherwise, most of the procedure would concern the particular entity on how to do evaluation. Then we have the PPDA rules and methods for procurement of supplies, works, and non-consultancy services regulations 2023. These give the detailed procedure for each method of procurement. If it is open bidding, when do you use open bidding? If it is restricted, if it is micro, when do you use what? So that is there in the rules and methods. Then we have procurement of consultancy services. It was in existence. It was just revised. It gives the procedure when you're procuring consultancy services. Then we have the disposal of public assets regulations. As you hear, we are the PPDA. So we have procurement and disposal. So besides the procurement bit, we also have the procedure for how disposal of public assets is done. Once they acquire, how then do they get rid of these things? Then the PPDA administrative review regulations, this should be of particular interest to you in case you're dissatisfied with a particular process. How do you go about raising your complaint? Then we have the contracts regulations. We also have some changes there, which may be of particular interest to you. I want to move on to a few highlights in each of these regulations that may be of interest to you. But before I do that, there are other instruments that were issued to support these regulations. We have the local government's public procurement and disposal of public assets regulations revocation instrument 2023. So it's this instrument that revokes the local government regulations of 2006, so that now both local governments and central government are using one set of regulations. Then we have the PPDA guidelines 1 to 10 of 2024. And then, of course, the guideline on local content and reservation scheme for youth, women, and persons with disabilities. This last one on local content is yet to be released, but the new future is the thresholds that are reserved for, and the categories that are reserved for youth, women, and persons with disabilities. Otherwise, the ones that were reserved before are still the same, and we are going to see the thresholds that are reserved. One other key thing to note is that all these revised regulations have transitional provisions. What do I mean? A process that commenced under the revoked regulations should be concluded under the 2023 regulations. If an advert, for example, went out before the new regulations, before February 5th, and now it's time to return the bids, the evaluation will now be done in accordance with the new regulations. Even when we are auditing, we'll be auditing that procurement in line with the new regulations. So anything that started under the old regulations has to be completed under the new regulations. So the idea that if it started under the old regulations, it should be continued under the new regulations, no, that is not the case. Where the new regulations form the procurement, they proceed with that procurement. So I want to proceed to the highlights in the regulations themselves. I'll start with the one on rules and methods for procurement of supplies, works, and non-consultancy services regulations. In line with Section 61 on sustainable procurement, we are saying procurement should be environmentally and socially responsive. It should contribute positively to the quality of life and of the environment of the community it affects. You agree with me that we are now experiencing a heat wave as a result of our activities within the environment. So as procurement, we are saying we should also contribute, we should have procurement that is preserving the environment. Recently, I was hearing a report on focus on Africa, and the toothbrushes, toothbrushes are made out of plastic that were manufactured from the 1930s are still somewhere within the environment, and they weigh tons and tons, and they are not decomposing. They are somewhere degrading the environment. And the proposed alternative is having bamboo toothbrushes, and they are currently being manufactured in China. So as business people, these are the things that we should be looking at, things that are contributing positively to the environment, not degrading it. So now we are saying that in procurement, bidding document for supplies, works and non-consultancy services, they have to specify the environmental protection issues and social inclusion issues applicable to the procurement requirement. And the contractors have to indicate, you have to indicate that you abide by these provisions. As people who are involved in construction, in works, I'm sure with the new bidding document that we revised in 2019, you are already implementing some of these things. When you talk about environmental protection issues, the first thing that comes to someone's mind is planting of trees and planting of grass, but there's a lot more involved in environmental protection. And now entities have to put this in the bidding documents, and you also have to abide by them. Things of waste disposal, things of drainage, sinking the barrel pits where you're getting the materials. Are we preserving the environment? Now we're saying all these things will have to be in the bidding document, and you have to indicate that you're going to abide by them and how you are going to abide by them. If you're constructing a site and there's traffic, how are you managing the traffic? There are children within the area. Are you sealing off the construction site? These are things that we are now taking seriously in procurement. We are not just looking at the cost of the project, but also these issues. And we are saying right away from the bidding document, they will be included. We're saying the bidding documents have to indicate the application of preference or reservation schemes where applicable. And this is for the benefit of us, the Ugandan providers. So right away when the advert goes out, you know that either this procurement is reserved for us or not, so that you can participate. And if there's application of preference schemes, you know there's an advantage that is going to be offered to the Ugandan providers. So look out for those provisions within the bidding documents where you're participating, so that you can be able to partake of them. We are reducing the minimum bidding period for pre-qualification. Before it used to be 15 working days. Now we are saying it's 10 working days under open bidding and 20 working days under open international. You may see this as a disadvantage to you because this is the time now that you have to prepare your bidding document, to look for all your documents and put them in order, look for all the requirements, look for the personnel that you're going to use and have them sign on their CVs, get the bid security, all those things. We are saying if it is pre-qualification, you have 10 days. But all this is in a bid to reduce the procurement lead time so that we have efficiency. So now you have less time for pre-qualification. We're also going to see the time under the other methods of procurement. In these regulations for rules and methods, we've put the conditions for use of the different methods. By value, we are going to look at the different thresholds, then the circumstances and type of the procurement. Is it an emergency? Then maybe you can use direct procurement. Are there limited providers? There we are looking at using restricted bidding. We're using at request for quotations. We are looking at micro procurement. Is it for compatibility and continuity? The provider is already constructing the road and you have another section of the road that you need to be continued. Would it be better to have the same provider continue for purposes of compatibility and continuity? So there you can use direct procurement. So we are giving them these conditions. So, and it is key that you also know that under these circumstances, this method may be used, and that is why particular bidders may be chosen to do certain types of works. This will be, the next one is of particular interest to you. A bidder may on his or her own discretion extend the bid validity period where the PDE delays to request the bidder to extend the bid, and the bid validity period is likely to expire before the completion of the procurement process. As bidders, as business people, as service providers, you may realize that it's maybe 2 weeks to the expiry of your bid and you have not got any communication from the entity. Before, it had to be the entity to write to you and request you to extend your bid validity. Now we are saying you can write and say, I'm extending my bid. If it was expiring on, say, 5th February, and you extend it up to maybe 5th April 2024. So we are leaving that at your discretion. This will present problems, especially if you have complained. There's an administrative review going on, you succeed, but then your bid is expired. The entity cannot sign a contract with you despite the outcome of the administrative review. And they will do it intentionally, so that your bids expire. But now the ball is within your court. You can extend your bid, because if that bid expires, then there is no offer. There's nothing the entity for the entity to accept. Therefore, you cannot have a valid contract. You cannot have a legally binding contract. But now it is within your powers. You can extend your bid validity in case there are delays. Now, another thing that is to your advantage, where there's a request to extend the bid validity, or where on your own discretion you've extended the bid validity. And in this particular procurement, there was a bid security. We are now saying when you're extending, instead of extending the bid security, instead of extending the bank guarantee, you can now extend the bid security in form of a bid securing declaration. And this was one of the things that were as a result of lobbying from UNAPSEC. It is an issue that was presented to PPDA, and they were saying really some of these delays are not a result of the providers, of the bidders. It is the entity's fault. Why should we again keep our money in the bank because the entity is delaying? We can extend by giving a bid securing declaration, and PPDA will listen, and now this has been done. And we are hoping this will reduce your costs as bidders. When your costs are reduced, this money that would have been kept in the bank, you'll be able to invest it in other things. You'll be able to use it for other things. And the bid securing declaration ideally serves the same purpose as the bid security in form of a bank guarantee. Because as bidders, if you've already provided the bank guarantee as bid security, you've already shown seriousness to participate in the process. So when you give us a securing declaration, in case you withdraw your bid before the completion of the process, then you would be liable to suspension by PPDA. But at least then I don't think you'll be withdrawing at that point. I'm sure you'll stay into the game until the end of the process. These formats, like we were providing the format for the bank guarantee, even the bid securing declaration is already provided for. So it is that same format that you'll use in case we are extending the bid security. Then this one I have highlighted in red. I know we've already got feedback that it may not be possible, it may not work, but let's see. We're saying a bid submitted by a bidder with arithmetic errors shall be rejected during evaluation. I know most of you are involved in works. Most of you have ever submitted bids for construction, for works, and we've got feedback that it is not possible to prepare a bid without errors. But again, on the other side of the coin, providers have been using this as an excuse. They prepare the bid intentionally with errors. So when they've already found out what the other bidders have quoted, then that will determine whether they accept the corrections or not. And these errors sometimes would increase or reduce the bidder's bid price. Now we are saying if you submit with arithmetic errors, you shall be rejected. If you're lucky and the errors are not discovered by the evaluation committee, then we shall proceed. But if they are discovered, we are saying your bid shall be rejected. So we no longer have that procedure in the regulations where we are guiding entities on how to correct these arithmetic errors. This procedure is still there in the bidding documents, but it is something we are working on in revising the bidding documents so that we bring them in line with the provisions of the regulations. And now that we are moving on to the electronic government procurement system, where we are preparing everything online, we are not expecting these arithmetic errors. Again, I emphasize, let's see how this works. The law is not static, so do not get worried. In case we see there are challenges, please raise them the way you've been doing, and definitely we shall see how to make changes in case something is not working. In these regulations for rules and methods, just like we provided for it in the Act, we are now providing for delivery of a bid to one entity electronically. So if you're submitting a bid, you need to take note of what the entity has provided for. Is it on EGP? Is it an email address? Now with the recent High Court decision, even WhatsApp is electronic communication. But you need to take note, what has the entity provided for? Don't go with the High Court decision and because you have Canon Benson Turamia's number, you just submit your bid on his WhatsApp number and assume that you have submitted your bid electronically. No, you need to take note of what the entity has put in the bidding document. If it is electronic, where, which email address, and when is the deadline of bid submission. It is very important, especially when it regards to electronic bid submission. Before in the manual way, if it was 1 second after 11, probably you would be able to submit your bid. But now in the system, if it is EGP, if it is 11, it is 11. You'll be locked out of the system and you will not be able to submit your bid. And it goes with the system time. As I'm talking now, I have like 3 different times in the room. On my desk phone, it's reading 11:05. On my phone, it is 11:06. On the computer, it is 11:10. They're different times. So you need to take note that you're submitting at the right time in accordance with what has been indicated in the bidding document. But we've made this provision for electronic bid submission. We're saying these bidding documents also contain instructions to bidders, you, regarding the information to be read out and recorded at the bid opening session. So if the name of the bidder is required to be read, it will be indicated. Whether you've submitted a bid security will be indicated. Whether you submitted a power of attorney will be indicated. Your bid price. So that will be indicated in the bidding document that these are the things that will be read out during bid opening. So that as you're submitting your bid, you are aware that the other bidders will be able to know that you submitted a power of attorney or not. They'll be able to know your bid price and so on. Then we are saying a member of the public may attend a public bid opening. So we are trying to promote transparency, and with the system, it will be automatic bid opening with EGP. So anyone will be able to see which bids have been opened. I want to move on to the next regulation, but before that, I promise to tell you the revised bidding periods. These are minimum bidding periods. Bidding periods are the time from the time the advert goes out to the deadline of bid submission, or if it is an invitation to bid, it is restricted bidding. That time that you have for you to prepare your tender, your bid, so that you can submit it, that is a bidding period. These are minimum. They can be increased, but they can't be reduced. So as you're preparing your bids, you need to look at that time that they've given you to prepare. Is it in line with what the law says? If not, then bring it to their attention. We've reduced them. I note it might be to your disadvantage, but we are saying we need to have efficiency. We need to reduce the lead times. So for open domestic bidding, it was previously 20 working days. It's now 15 working days. Open international bidding, it was 30 days. Now it is 20 working days. Restricted domestic bidding, it was 12 working days. And now it is 10 working days. Restricted international bidding, it was 20 working days, and now it's 15 working days. If it is quotation, they've remained 5 working days. And for direct procurement, there's no minimum bidding period. This can even be done in a day or hours. If it is, we are sole sourcing, we are single sourcing, then we are saying we are not putting a minimum period that can be done in as less days as possible. A few things you need to note in evaluation. We're saying if post evaluation is to be done, the criteria has to be stated in the solicitation document, in the bidding document, just like the other criteria, even post-qualification, especially on the best evaluated bidder. This is specific to assess their capacity. If they put that they have this number of equipment, they have a water bowser, then we come and verify that actually you have the water bowser. They've talked of offices. We come and confirm that you actually have the offices and you'll be able to perform. So that is what is in post-qualification, and it has to be indicated what would be reviewed under that criteria. Then under the technical evaluation, this is where we assess your ability to perform. So we assess the technical, and then for financial, we assess the financial costs in comparison to the other bidders. Key to note in financial comparison, we may include costs for disposal of assets procured or decommissioning where applicable, as may be specified in the bidding document. Sometimes there are assets like medical equipment that are procured in these medical facilities, in hospitals, in health centers. And at the end of the day, they sit there emitting radiation into the environment, further contributing to degrading our environment. But we are saying if there is an option for disposing of these assets right away from procurement, these costs for disposal have to be included. IT equipment, they may be lying around, but we could have a disposal mechanism, maybe a return policy, so that after they are returned, we are still looking at trying to save our environment. So these costs, we are not putting them on the provider. They have to be included in the bidding document right away from the beginning, so that they are evaluated. Things will cost and maintenance, repair and maintenance, they have to be included. Then any costs prescribed in the environmental, social, and management plan. Again, those who have been participating in works procurements in construction, this started in 2019. We now have to put the environmental, social, and management plan. It has to be costed. It has to be evaluated, because it's not going to be free for you to replant trees, for you to replant grass, for you to manage traffic, for you to hold off a site. So those costs have to be taken care of. It's not just a matter of constructing a building, constructing a road, but how are you restoring the environment? How are you treating your workers? In case there are extra costs to be incurred there, we are now saying they have to be included and they have to be evaluated. I want to move on to the next regulation. This is on procurement of consultancy services. Certain members on the call, some of you have ever participated in these procurements for consultancy services. You agree with me? Before, it was like a 2-in-1 process. There had to be first an expression of interest. It is like pre-qualification in the other categories. But in consultants, it was mandatory. Then after doing expression of interest, you would be evaluated. And then you'd be now re-invited to pick the request for proposals document. But now we are saying this is optional. In case we find the consultancy service is complex, that is when you first do an expression of interest to gauge the market. So you see who is out there that can be able to provide the services. Otherwise, if it is simple, you can use these other normal methods, like for the other categories, the open bidding, the restricted bidding, the request for quotations, the micro procurement, and the conditions for use of these methods are provided for. And we're going to see in the guideline on the thresholds for each of these methods. I already took you through some for you. Where we use restricted is where we have limited providers. Where we have one provider, we may use direct. Where we need continuity and compatibility, we may use direct. We are saying now those same methods are the same methods that we use for consultancy services. In the consultancy regulations, we are further providing that a firm or a consultant that is not recommended for financial evaluation has to be notified. This was still there, the previous regulation. But once you're notified, then you may request for a debrief. And when you request for that debrief, the entity should give you the debrief within 2 working days. Previously, it used to be 10 working days. Now we are saying it should be 2. You need to know this in case you are participating in a consultancy procurement. And we are saying those that are successful, they need to be notified of the date for opening of financial proposals, specifying the location, the date, and the time. And it should be within 3 calendar days after the notification. Previously, it used to be 5. Arithmetic errors is also coming up in consultancy services. You're saying a bid that has an arithmetic error shall be disqualified from the evaluation process. Evaluation committee no longer has that mandate to correct any errors. So prepare your bids carefully so that we avoid those issues. We haven't put a margin of whether it is minor or major, even if it is a decimal point, even if it is by 1, we are saying no correction of arithmetic errors. Again, we shall see how it works and give guidance accordingly. Members, permit me to move on to the next regulation. I know we are providers, and once we participate in the procurement process, there could be chance to also participate in the disposal process. So we have rules for disposal by public bidding. So that is where the notice has to be displayed on the notice board of the entity or the website of the entity or the website of PPDA. So when you see it as a member of the public, it is within your right to participate in that disposal process. The minimum bidding period from when you see the advert to the time that you have to submit your bid, you have 3 working days for biological assets. These are assets that have life, livestock, cows, birds, such things. They're entities that have those assets for disposal. The ministry, like Ministry of Agriculture, they may have such assets. Then for the others, it is 10 working days. So you have 10 working days from the time you see the advert to the time you're supposed to submit your bid. That is a minimum. It can be more depending on the entity, but we're saying know your rights. If they've offered you a lesser period, it is within your rights to bring it to the attention of the entity and also PPDA. Then public auction is the other method of disposal that you may participate in as a member of the public, and the auctioneer has to announce the successful bidder. When I talk of auctioning, I assume we all understand it. You'll be advised to pay the contract price within 1 working day from the date of the auction. But the auctioneer now has to record the particulars of those people who have been, shouting out their prices. So that in case the best evaluated, the one who gave the highest price, does not pay within the 1 working day, then we move on to the next highest bidder. So for disposal, we're saying you can submit your bid to the entity, except where we're using destruction of assets, we're using public auction, we're using conversion or classification of assets into another form. For disposal by sale, we're using trading, electronic auctioning, and transfer to another entity or donation. So for public bidding, you have to submit a bid. So these are the other methods of disposal. That is where you will not be able to submit a written bid. We all know for auction, we just in a hall and we submit the prices that we are willing to buy the particular item. Before, we did not have disposal by donation on corporate social responsibility grounds. We are now allowing this in the disposal regulations. So If an entity wants to donate to UNABSEC, for example, their vehicle on grounds of corporate social responsibility, we're saying this is now allowed. Before, in disposal, you had to include bid security, just like in procurement. But now we are saying you can submit your bids with a bid securing declaration. Again, this is in a bid to reduce, just like we had reducing the cost of procurement, now we are reducing the cost of participating in a disposal, because for bid securing declaration, you won't have to go to the bank. You just have to fill in your statements that you will not withdraw your bid. We are providing for rebidding amongst bidders in case of a price tie. We are bidding for an asset, a motor vehicle, the ED's car, for example. We are disposing of it. But bidders, Miriam and Madam Edie both quote 50 million, for example. We are saying Miriam and Edie can be able to resubmit their financials. As they are resubmitting, we are cognizant that one of them will try to undercut the other or go above the other so that they get the asset. So the one who is higher is the one that gets the asset in case of disposal. So this rebidding has also been introduced in procurement. In case your bid price ties with another bidder, you resubmit your financials, and then the one who is lowest in procurement, because at that point we've already done the technical, you've already passed, now we are just comparing the prices. We are providing for cancellation of a disposal process where it is necessary, then there can be a recommendation for cancellation. And we are saying the entity will not release the asset disposed of until you've paid the full contract price as a best evaluated bidder. I want to move on to the evaluation regulations. We are providing clarity. We are saying that evaluation committee may at any stage of the evaluation request a bidder to clarify information provided in the bid or to submit additional information or documents within a period which shall be indicated in the request. As you're participating in this procurement process, sometimes you are in a rush. We know that there are certain companies that are in existence, but they may have forgotten to submit the certificate of incorporation, for example, yet it was a requirement. We are saying the evaluation committee can request you to submit that information, but they will tell you the period that you submit within 2 days, for example, and it will be indicated in the request. So within the 2 days, you need to submit that certificate of incorporation, but you need to note that this information or documents have to be valid at the date of deadline for bid submission. If it was a certificate of incorporation and the deadline for submission was say 22nd January 2024, when you submit your certificate of incorporation, it should have been in existence by 22nd February 2024. Like if it's dated 2018, 2019, or even January 2024, it is okay. But if on 22nd, when they request you to submit, is when you go to URSB to register and get the certificate, even if you get it on that same day of 22nd February 2024, we shall assume that it was not in existence on the deadline of bid submission, so it will not be allowed. But if it was in existence before and it was just a matter of maybe having forgotten then it will be considered. However, if they request you to submit the document and you fail to respond, this will lead to disqualification because you had not fulfilled the requirements. This was just like another consideration, but now you haven't adhered to it, then you'll be disqualified. So just like we are allowing for electronic bid submission, we are saying this information that is requested for can also be submitted electronically. So the entity would have to indicate to you if it is to be submitted electronically, which email address it will be indicated. Do not come up with your own address. In the evaluation regulations, we are providing that the scores for technical bids have to be displayed on the notice board of the entity. Debrief has to be provided within 2 working days. This is the same as what we've seen before for consultancy. Previously, it was 10 working days. And then a copy of the record should be displayed on the entity's website or the notice board after the opening session, and it has to be displayed for a minimum of 4 weeks. All this is for transparency, that we see whose bids were submitted, which ones were opened. That two should be matching. I earlier talked about negotiations, how they are now allowed. Now in the regulations, we are talking about what may be negotiated upon. It is not straight away on the price, because we realized even if it was you and me, the moment you are told, you say you are bid and you give your price that you will make, say a table at 5 million shillings. When I'm negotiating with you and I say for me I can give you 3 million, you might accept. But when you do, I know somewhere you're going to compromise on the quality, which we do not want. So instead of maybe you are going to use mahogany at 5 million, then you go and use say jackfruit tree, fene tree, for my 3 million, which will not be the same quality that I was anticipating. So even if we are negotiating to fit within our budget, we are not going straight away to price. We're saying we can negotiate on minor alterations of technical details of the assessment of requirements, in reduction of quantities of the procurement requirement. If I wanted 2 tables, okay, give me 1 so that I fit within my money. Minor amendments to the special conditions of contract, agreement for the delivery or work schedule. If you wanted me to deliver in 3 days, we can negotiate and agree that maybe you deliver in 2, that is a lesser period or a further period. So we can negotiate on that. We can negotiate on the proposed methodology or staffing, inputs required from the entity. These are the areas that we can negotiate on whatever method of procurement that the entity may have used. So in case negotiations are to be done, the procurement and disposal unit will, in writing, notify the bidder of the following: the date, time, and venue of the negotiations, and the request for the bidder to confirm attendance. You will also have the objective of the negotiations, then request you to give the profiles of the personnel of the bidder to attend the negotiations, and will also include information that you're supposed to bear the costs that you incur for the duration of the negotiations. We shall not be the ones as the entity, as government, taking care of your costs. You have to meet your own costs. Then you have to confirm impartiality of the bidder with the negotiation team, and that there is no conflict of interest between the bidder and the member of the negotiation team. As a bidder or a provider or a supplier during negotiations, you may appoint a representative to attend the negotiations, or you may request that the negotiations are carried out using electronic means of communication, say teleconferencing, video call, that sort of thing, Zoom, like what we're doing now. So we can have our negotiations on Zoom without necessarily meeting physically. So we are providing for all that in the negotiation regulations. I want to move on to the PDA regulations. These ones I told you have to do with the internal workings of the different entities. I picked out these two that might be of particular concern to you as providers. These are some of the reasons that a procurement or a disposal process may be cancelled. I'm sure in your encounters or participation in procurement, you've seen some procurements that have been cancelled. Sometimes it is intentional to frustrate bidders, because probably the bidder that is best evaluated is not the one that the entity wanted. Now we are giving specific grounds where a procurement may be cancelled. So you need to have this at the back of your mind, that a procurement may be cancelled, but the reason that should be given should be like lack of adequate funding. I think that is really acceptable. If we no longer have the money, priorities have changed, and maybe we've had a change of budgeting and we no longer have the money, we may not have a choice but to cancel the procurement. A significant change in the technical details of the procurement requirement, or a significant change in the circumstances of the procurement requirement could lead to cancellation of a procurement. You could have had maybe it's a procurement for a construction in these areas of the eastern Bududa where there's flooding. The land even moves. You might find that the procurement was for construction on that land. You wake up in the morning and the land moved. You no longer have land for construction. So the entity may not have a choice but to cancel such a procurement. As providers, as people in the construction business, as potential bidders, we need to have these at the back of our minds, that cancellation can happen. So we may not put the entity at fault that you put in money in bidding and now they are cancelling, so you're suing, you're up in arms. Know that cancellation can occur, and it's not at the liability of the entity. We have due diligence also provided for in the PDE regulations, and it provides that due diligence may be undertaken at any time. And now we are putting a timeline for that any time. That should be from the commencement of the evaluation process to before signing off the contract. We've had instances and complaints from the providers where they've even already signed the contract. Someone has already mobilized to start work. Then the entity comes up that they did due diligence and found that the bidder has no capacity, or they are not up to the job, so they want to cancel the procurement. We're saying if there's any due diligence to be done, it should be before signing the contract. So that again, we avoid our potential partners in business, the providers, from putting in money after getting the contracts, and then you cancel after such instances of having done due diligence. Due diligence, just like post-qualification, is to confirm that you actually have the capacity. you're not suspended. You are in existence, because we've had instances where money was paid to a non-existing company. I think you're all aware of the Katosi saga. You're all aware of the bicycle LC1 chairman instances. If due diligence had been done on those companies, those instances would not have occurred. But we are saying do it before signing the contract, and the provider should also be aware. And then we have the contracts regulations. We are telling entities to display the details of the contract signed. What are these details? The name of the provider, the subject of the procurement, the estimated value, and the duration of that contract. So we are saying this information should be available to the public. Again, this is transparency. Previously, this was submitted in reports to PPDA, but we are saying display on your website, on the PPDA website, or any other conspicuous website. For those on EGP, definitely it would be accessible automatically. We are providing for circumstances for payment to a provider in full. Previously, payment was limited to 30%. But we're saying if there are circumstances where you have to get full payment, then there has to be approval by the Attorney General and also authorization from the Permanent Secretary to Treasury. Why? These two offices handle different mandates. So the Attorney General has to look at the contractual terms and see that indeed they are favorable for both the entity and the provider, and they can get full payment. Then PSST has to look at the issue of finances. Is the money available actually to make the full payment? So if the two are at par, then we can pay beyond the 30%. We are hoping that when we get payment above this 30% or even full in advance, this will improve contractors' liquidity. And we are hoping this will in turn enhance delivery of project timelines. This was another issue that was advocated for by UNAPSEC, to have at least flexibility to get a payment before execution. But again, you have to bear with government sometimes. Sometimes this money is also not available. Even the 30% advance that we are talking about, it may not be available in the government coffers. Even when you've finished implementing the project, payment may take some time. So sometimes it's not an issue of the law or not wanting to pay the providers. Sometimes it's the money itself not being available. Otherwise, we've made the law flexible to allow payment beyond the 30%, even up to 100%. But we have to get approval of the Attorney General and the Permanent Secretary to Treasury, that is Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Now, in the contracts regulations, we've also made provision for environmental and social aspects to be considered in the contract management plan. Those things that we had put in the bidding document that as contractors you agreed to abide to. We're saying during contract management, these have to be monitored. They have to be put in the plan and they have to be monitored to ensure that they are implemented. If they are not, that is an issue of non-performance, and it can be a ground for cashing a performance security if they are not adhered to. So as contractors, we need to have this at the back of our minds. Then we have for framework contracts. Before it was only on fixed price. We've also introduced payment on commission rates. There are some services where payment is on commission, auctioning services, valuation services may be based on commission. So there may be entities that need these services repeatedly, or like Ministry of Lands. We're saying when we are getting providers engaged on framework contract, then it can be based on commission, unlike fixed prices, as was the case before. We made provision for exceptions on procurement of frameworks. Before, it was only where you've used open bidding, then you can enter into a framework. Now we are saying in case there's a limited number of providers, there are few providers, then you can invite the few providers, then engage them on a framework contract basis. If there's only one provider, you can still engage them through direct procurement and sign a framework contract. Otherwise, before, to enter into a framework, you had to first advertise, evaluate, and then engage on framework. But now we've opened up to the other methods. Then you enter into a framework. Then for change orders, we've increased the percentage from 0.1% to 1% for single change, then from 1% to 1.5% for cumulative changes. So if it is exceeding these changes, and that amounts to amendment of a contract, that has to go to Solicitor General for approval. I know as business people who have been involved in big projects, this 1% can be a big amount for multi-billion projects. So we are hoping that this change would take care of variations that may result from unforeseen circumstances, so that we are able to cushion the providers so that they are not at a loss. We are providing for contract renewals. These are acceptable ones, and there is a schedule for the specific contracts that are renewable. It's not every contract that is renewable, and this is to give a chance to actually get another service provider on board as you are renewing for that period. Which kind of services are we talking about in the schedule 3 to the contracts regulations? We are looking at supplies like medical supplies. We are looking at non-consultancy services like maintenance of buildings and fixtures and furnishings of buildings. We are looking at rental agreements. We are looking at cleaning services, security services, catering services. But this schedule is not cast in stone. In case we find there are other contracts that are susceptible to renewal, and then we can revise and include such contracts. But for the moment, those are the ones that we have, because it would not make much sense, for example, for rental. An entity is renting, and each time they need to renew their tenancy, they have to go through another procurement process. I say you can just renew, but once after that, then approval has to be sought from PSST and Attorney General, just like payment in full, even renewal. We are looking at the contractual terms as well as the financial capability. So next, I want to look at the administrative review regulations. I've already talked about the two-tier system of administrative review, from accounting officer to the tribunal. When we have administrative review, the procurement process is halted, except extension of bid validity and security. Otherwise, we cannot do anything else. We cannot sign a contract as the administrative review process is ongoing. As providers, as contractors, that should be at the back of your mind. In case you lodge an administrative review and you see the entity has signed a contract, the person is even on the ground already implementing, yet you have your administrative review pending at the tribunal, then that is a red flag that you need to immediately raise with the authority, and then we shall intervene. If you intend to appeal to the tribunal from the decision of the accounting officer, in these regulations, we are saying you have to give the accounting officer notice within five days. From, say, if he's given a decision, then 5 days from that decision. If it is, he hasn't given a decision within 10 days, then within 5 days from the expiry of those 10 days, you give notice that you are going to appeal. Now, in these regulations, we are saying if the process was suspended and you are appealing to the High Court, then the process will resume. The process is only stopped up to the PPDA appeals tribunal. Then at High Court, in case you win, the High Court has unlimited jurisdiction. They can give you any remedy in terms of maybe damages to compensate you or punish the entity. So in terms of money, the High Court may give you a remedy. Otherwise, like I said, as government, we are interested in service delivery, while for you business people, you may be interested in business. So you want to fight up to wherever it ends. But we are saying the process, the procurement process needs to proceed so that we have service delivery. So when it proceeds and you still win at High Court, then High Court may give you other remedies. These are the fees. These are provided for in the regulations. You may not know the estimated value of the procurement, so it is up to the accounting officer to advise you on the fees to be paid. Because for you, you may have given your bid price as, say, 100 million, for example. But the estimated value that the entity has is 500 million. So for you, you might think that the fees payable is 500,000 when it's actually 1.5. So the entity needs to advise you on the fees to pay for administrative review. If it is worth 100 million, you pay 500,000. 100 million up to 500 million, 1.5. 500 million up to 1 billion, 2.5. 1 billion up to 50 billion, 5 million. 50 billion to 100 billion, 10 million. Then if it is above 100 billion, it's 15 million. These fees are refundable if you are successful. If you're not successful, then of course they'll be forfeited. Then expression of interest and general pre-qualification, it is 500,000. These fees are provided for at the very back of the administrative review regulations. So you need to keep them in mind in case you have intention to lodge a complaint against a particular process. So this was the last of the regulations. I want to move on to the guidelines. We have a set of 10 guidelines that we've recently issued. Guideline 1 may be of interest to you on thresholds to know when a particular method is used. Guideline 2 may not be of interest to you. It is for the entity. Bid and performance securities is of interest to you. Code of ethical conduct for bidders and providers, you need to know of it. Then use of third-party procurement and disposal providers is of interest to you. Pre-bid meetings is of interest to you. You need to know what is there. Guideline 7, administrative review fees. It is important to you. Guideline 8 may not be important to you. Neither is 9 and 10. Those are for the entities. So for those that have highlighted to be of importance to you, I'm going to go through what they are providing for, the highlights, a brief highlight of what they have. so that you are better prepared to participate in procurement, knowing what has changed. So these were the previous thresholds under the central government entities. For works, if it was above 500 million, it had to be advertised. Now we are saying if it is above 800 million is when they will advertise. That is when they will use open bidding. Restricted, it's now 400 million to 800 million. Quotation 10 million to 400 million. Then micro, below 10 million. There's a new method of electronic reverse auction that was introduced. It works like auctioning in disposal, only that now it is in reverse. Instead of quoting or bidding higher in procurement, you would be bidding lower. So you'd be bidding lower, but online on the system until the deadline or until the time for the auction closes. So the one who is lowest is the one that would be awarded the contract, but it should be for low value procurements within the thresholds of micro procurement, that is below 10 million. Then for supplies and non-consultancy services, above 200 million, you had to advertise. Now we've increased this. It is now 400 million. It is above 400 million that you have to advertise. Between 200 and 400 million, it is restricted. It can be by invitation, either from the entities pre-qualified list, another entities pre-qualified list, PPDA's register of providers, or from market knowledge. Quotations is 5 million to 400 million. Sorry, not 400, that is 200 million. Then micro, below 5 million. And then electronic reverse auction. This is for supplies and non-consultancy. It is below 10 million. 5 million, sorry, not 10. The thing was moving faster than me. Then for consultancy services, it is similar to supplies and non-consultancy in regard to consultancy firms. But if it is individual consultants, it's a bit lower. If it is below 200 million, they would have to advertise. That is when you see the advert in the papers and you'll be able to participate. Restricted between 100 and 200 million, quotation 5 million to 100 million, micro 5 million. The choice of when to use a consultancy firm or an individual consultant would be up to the entity, depending on the needs of the procurement and the service that is needed. So you need to keep this at the back of your mind to know what determines what the entity uses as a method of procurement. These were the thresholds under local government, but as I've been mentioning, now we are using the same regulations, we are using the same guidelines. So if you are participating in a local government entity, know that the thresholds are the same as what I've highlighted in the previous slide. I talked about guideline 3 on bid and performance securities, and this was mentioned by the ED, that it was one of the areas that were lobbied for. I'm glad that it has come to pass. Bid security has reduced. Previously, it used to be a range of 1% to 2%, but out of lobbying by UNAPSEC, they proposed that at least it should be 1%, and we listened. So this has been reduced to 1%. So if it is a procurement, say it is worth 5 million, for example. It's 500 million. The bid security, which is 1% of the 500 million, would be 5 million. But it can be lower. being lower is also allowed. So it can be 4.5, it can be 4. Lower is okay. What is not allowed is having it higher. If it is 500 million, you can't have a bid security of 10 million. So as potential bidders, you need to be aware of the provision so that you're not taken advantage of. We have a range of securities in addition to the bank guarantee. We now have the bid securing declaration. It was there before, but now we are saying if you're extending, you can use it. And now we also have insurance bid bonds. This was also a proposal from UNABSEC. And the argument was for getting the bank guarantees, it is a cost, it is expensive. I have to put money in the bank, the administrative costs of actually getting it, and then again extending it. But there's an option of having insurance bonds, and we listened. And now we also have these insurance bonds. So these bonds have to also be from a provider who is regulated by insurance regulatory authority, just like the bank guarantee has to be from a financial institution that is regulated by Bank of Uganda. We are going to provide the format in our bidding documents, standard bidding documents. It has been agreed upon with Insurance Regulatory Authority. It is unconditional, just like the bank guarantee is, because that is the area where we had failed to agree with IRA because they wanted a conditional bond. Because for insurance, you have to give the reasons why you want to cash the bond. But in procurement, you're saying if you've withdrawn your bid, we only have to present that you've withdrawn your bid without giving evidence, and then we just cash the security. Same goes for the performance security. Before it was 5% to 10%, and entities would take advantage and request for the maximum of 10%. We are now saying this should not exceed 5% of the value of the procurement. For example, if the procurement or the contract is worth 500 million, the performance security should not exceed 25 million, but it can be below. That is okay. And in this performance security is where we are saying ESHS issues have to be embedded within this security as well. Issues of environment, social health, and safety. In case you're not fulfilling them, then within this 5%, it can be cashed. On the modalities of implementation, we shall see on whether we have a different security, say of 2% for ESHS, then 3% for performance. That will be up to the entity as we are implementing. Otherwise, everything should be within the 5%. Just like we have the bid securing declaration, we've also introduced performance securance declarations. So instead of having the bank guarantee, we are saying you can just declare, making statements that you will perform. In case you fail to perform, then you are liable to suspension by PPDA, and we've put a period of suspension for 3 years in case you fail to perform. Then performance bonds, also like the insurance bid bonds, in case you fail to perform, we cash it. So we are hoping with these changes, we are going to have a reduction in your costs as contractors. It will reduce your costs of doing business with government. At the end of the day, it will boost your cash flow. So we are hoping it will also improve implementation of projects. At the end of the day, we shall improve procurement performance within the government entities. I want to move on to another guideline. This is guideline Guideline 4 on the Code of Ethical Conduct for Bidders and Providers. We've introduced this new code to take care of issues of labor, human rights, social responsibility, health and safety, and environmental conduct. You have to abide by this code. So you need to take note of that. We have 5 on use of third-party providers. This is where we are providing for an entity does not have capacity. They may engage a third party, but they cannot perform the functions of contracts committee. They can prepare bidding documents, they can issue invitation to bid, they can receive bids, and they can evaluate. So you may be called upon to participate in such procurements where it is not the entity, but it's another provider that is doing the procurement on their behalf. And I'm certain you've participated in some of these. We have the guideline on pre-bid meetings. We are saying you should be given at least 3 working days. For any meeting that you've ever attended, you're given notice for the meeting. So for this particular one, you're saying at least 3 working days for the notice of the pre-bid meeting. Then from the pre-bid meeting to the deadline, at least 3 days for you to take into consideration any changes. Then in case there's a request for clarification, it should be sent to all bidders, a response on the clarification, and this should be within 2 days. Then administrative review. I've already mentioned, accounting officer should advise you on the fees. I've displayed for you the fees, which are determined by the value of the procurement. If it is in lots, then the fees will be determined by value of each lot, not a combination of all the lots. Now, for government entities already registered on the system, these fees will be paid on the URA e-payment system. We no longer have issues of paying administrative review fees using a banker's check, using EFT or any other method. No, we are saying it has to be on the URA e-payment system. If an entity is not registered on the URA system, then it's up to the accounting officer to advise you on where to pay. If they don't advise you and then you don't pay, it's not a ground for them not to handle your administrative review. And the tribunal has come out strongly on this. If accounting officer does not respond to your request on how much to pay or where to pay, it should not be a ground for them not to handle the administrative review. And finally, the guideline on reservation schemes. This one is not new to you. 30% is reserved for the local providers through subcontracting for procurements at above 45 billion, and they should be substantial works, not these things of planting grass. So in the bidding document, it comes out clearly that these are the works that will be subcontracted, and the providers will be indicated. I promise to give you the thresholds in this guideline for reservation schemes. Supplies and consultancy services, 1 billion and below, is reserved for Ugandan nationals. Roadworks, it's 45 billion and below. Other public works like buildings, 10 billion and below. Then for non-consultancy services like cleaning services, security, if it's 200 million and below, it is reserved for local providers. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening to me. Miriam, over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Sheila. I must say you've done the presentation justice, and we've picked quite a number of things from it. I personally think PPDA has done a good job, of course, in collaboration with UNAPSEC, but I see a lot of consideration for the local providers, which is good that we are being considered, and we expect, of course, more opportunities for us and more friendly terms. Given that we are past that time that was slated for your presentation to end, I won't waste much more time. I want to go into the Q&A session so that we can hear from our participants and see, you know, what things do they want to know more about in regards to these new regulations. But I'll start from the chat itself. Seeing here, there's Engineer Muchibi Isaac, who is saying a bidder who fails to sign a contract has his bid security liquidated. In the same way, a PDE should compensate the bidders who participated in a cancelled procurement process. Fairness should be exhibited by all parties. I think that's, I don't know if you have any response to that, Ms. Sheila. Is there anything you can say in regards to that, Ms. Sheila?
At the moment, we haven't put that into consideration. It is a take-home, something that we can think about. But at the moment, when a procurement is cancelled, we are not putting liability on the entity, because the entity, just like a provider, has not given the provider any sort of security that you would maybe cash, unlike the provider who has given the bid security, which can be cashed. So it is something that we can take under advisement, but at the moment, no, there's no liability on the entity.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Sheila. I want to encourage those who want to speak to raise their hands. We are going to get to you shortly. Mr. Mike Seronkuma will be able to open up and unmute in due time. But let me still go to the chat. Mr. Moses Tiberondwa says, on errors in the bidding process, bidders who submit documents with arithmetic errors will be rejected or disqualified. Yes, this we saw in the regulations. Now he says, what about procurement entities that give out documents with errors? Could you please respond to that, Ms. Sheila?
Yes, Miriam, that's a good one. Well, what are you proposing we do for them? Currently, if you identify an error in the bidding document, you are supposed to communicate to the entity, copy PPDA, and by all means, this is corrected and clarified to all the other bidders. And there are some serious errors that they really make. There was an entity that gave BOQs for five floors, yet the storage building was supposed to be seven floors. And this was discovered by the bidders who picked the documents. So that error had to be corrected, but we can't say that maybe we cancel the process or disqualify the entity or something for the error. The best we can do is have it corrected. And sometimes bidders are also sharp. They leave you, you go with your error. At the time of implementation, they get you. Because you said 5 floors, now I'm constructing 5 floors, there's no way I'm going to construct 7. Or at the time of implementation, that is when they ask for variation, they ask for change orders, they ask for amendment. But as a way of disqualification or punishment, I don't see a way. We can only correct them at the point of bidding. I submit, Miriam.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sheila. Please, participants, we encourage you to raise up your hand in case you want to speak. Mr. Mike Serunkuma will be able to unmute you so that we can hear from you. Those who prefer to type, the chat room is open. You can type there. We'll be able to see your comments or your questions. Now, I think this is Mr. I don't know, Cordelia says the EGP system has technical glitches that need to be updated. For instance, we registered with our email and password. However, every time we try to log in, the system keeps saying that these credentials do not match our records. How or who should we contact to assist with the system glitches? Ms. Sheila?
Thank you so much, Marianne. Thank you so much, Cordelia. That is a genuine concern. The system is always under improvement and being updated. There's a desk contact, a service desk for EGP. You can get in touch with them. You can get in touch with us at PPDA because currently the system is not being housed with PPDA. It is with Ministry of Finance, but there are people who are always on call to help. Now, this error of not matching, you find that the email addresses, they need to delete those back end things, and then you have to enter them afresh. So there's nothing you can do as a user. It has to be the system help person themselves to make this change. So Cordelia, please get in touch with me. I can give you a contact of a desk person at EGP. I don't know if you've been in touch with any. There's Deus, there's Florence herself, the EGP manager, there's Rona. All this can help with such things. You may need to create a new account with a new email address, and then all your information will be migrated from the other account to the new account. But that is something that you have to do with someone on the EGP system itself on the back end, but it can be resolved. This is a new system. It will keep improving and updating. So Cordelia, no worries.
So
I'll share with you the contact.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Could you share a
I
contact?
don't know what I can share with. Can I share with Mike? Because I have Mike's number.
Yes, share the contact with Mike.
Okay, let me share with Mike on WhatsApp.
Cordelia, please provide your email address or mobile telephone number so that Mike can get in touch with you and you solve this issue. Now, there's someone else who's saying, this is Kwarikunda Edson. I pray the error has a margin of, let's say, 0.5, give or take. I don't know which error Edson is talking about. I don't know if you...
Arithmetic errors.
The arithmetic errors, okay.
Kwarikunda must be an engineer. They are the ones who have the 0.5%.
We have many engineers on here.
That he must be. I don't know where they get their 0.5%, but we've also adopted it all over the place. But like I said, even if it is even if 1 decimal point, even if 0.01%, we have not put a margin or a limit. So like I said, let's see how it works. If best practice dictates that we have a 0.5, we shall give that guidance. But as of now, that is how the regulations are. There's no margin, there's no limit, there's no less or more.
Okay. Mr. Niwamanya Andrew says, I think we can share the contact publicly. I have faced the glitch on the EGP personally. I don't know if you're in position to share it now, but I feel like your hands might be full at the moment. Maybe Mr. Nwamanya Andrew, I know he's a UNAPSEC member. Could you please also get in touch with Mike so that this issue can be sorted out after this webinar. I'd like to encourage our participants, please raise your hands, those who need to speak. I'm looking for more questions. Members, please ask questions, even if they are just comments, you know, even if you just want to supplement. We are here. That's why Ms. Shayla is here, so that we can live when we fully understood the effect of these new regulations on our businesses. And I like the fact that you didn't just dwell on the contracting side, you also touched the consultancy side, which is good, because even on this webinar, we have consultants. I've noticed some consultants have joined. So thank you very much, Ms. Shayla. Let's check the chat to see if there's anything else. I'm going to give it maybe 2 more minutes. If we are not getting any hand up or any more comments, I will have to move on to the next agenda item. But whoever is logging in or whoever has logged in, please remember to leave your email address and the name of your company or your name in the chat room, so that you can get this recording later on, and as well as the presentation. Mr. Mike, do we have any hands? I don't know if it's me who doesn't know how to navigate this Zoom properly.
I'm not seeing any hand yet.
Okay.
Maybe saying that everything has been understood and they are in agreement with everything. I can't see any hand up.
Okay. I think there were just a few clarifications members needed. Oh yes, there's Mr. Ivan Kasozi. What could be the thresholds for design and build? Could you talk about that, Ms. Shayla? However, I'd like to know thresholds in regard to what, Mr. Ivan?
Because design and build is what should I call it? It's a contract type. It is like a PPP, public-private partnership. Now, design and build is in the category of works. It would be in works. It has a combination of consultancy, services. So the threshold would either be the one for works. I'm thinking works not consultancy services. So the threshold we look at is done for works. If it is above 800 million, we have to advertise. Design and build is just a contract type. It's not a method of procurement. So the category there is works, and the threshold will be above 800 million, you advertise.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Shayla. 2 more minutes before we go to the next agenda item. I'm giving it 2 more minutes for people to raise their issues, their concerns, questions, even appreciations to our presenter. I must say, Ms. Sheila, you've done a very good job. I think that's why we have few questions. I think most of the things have been understood, and the fact that we've noticed a deliberate effort this time by PPDA in regards to promoting our local businesses, consultancies, and contractors. I'm sure people are more appreciative than, criticizing. So thank you very much, Ms. Sheila and your team. At this juncture, I'm going to have to go to the next agenda item.
There is a hand from Engineer Jonathan.
There's a hand? Okay, Mr. Mike, could you please mute the participants so that we can hear from them?
Yeah, thank you very much. Jonathan Tugume is my name. I am from a company called Dynaco Limited. And unfortunately, I didn't come in on time, but there's one of the highlights of the regulations that I wanted to ask about. Maybe a clarification. There is a clause on the highlights that say that a bid submitted by a bidder with an arithmetic error shall be rejected during evaluation. I wanted to know whether you had discussed this matter yet, and whether we are able to provide some input, because I think the spirit of correcting an error as per the old regulation was that if there's an error and it's arithmetic, it should be corrected and communicated to all bidders. I think that was all right. It was also that if this arithmetic error was due to an omission, for example, you omitted a value, they would pick the highest number for purposes of bid comparison. They would pick a highest number from the bidders that would probably disadvantage you the most and place it there and ask you to confirm it. And I think that also the spirit is appreciated, because then you don't take any advantage by giving a lower rate. Then, but if you reject the bid completely, then I think there'll be a loss to competitiveness, or there'll be a problem that maybe there will be arguments, or there'll be a fight, so that the arithmetic error is denied or is being forged or imposed on you. Did I miss that clarification? I think it shouldn't be rejected. Again, the last part of this, my input, just in case, is that there is, I think, in the World Bank guideline, at some point, I remember that if your arithmetic error correction would result in your bid being awarded, or for example, it would change the scenarios in award, then that means that your arithmetic error is material. So I think that this clause or amendment should be probably taken to materiality, and that's where it's qualified from. So if the arithmetic error, for example, means that then after the reading out of awards, the arithmetic error meant that somebody then wins, then it's a material deviation, and therefore it can then be either rejected or it can be the bid. Yeah, so why would the bid be rejected? Is it because of the materiality? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Jonathan. Yes, to answer your question, we had talked about this issue of arithmetic errors. I think about 2 or 3 people raised that issue. But for your sake, I'd like Ms. Sheila to reiterate what she said and provide some more insight to you. Ms. Sheila, please.
Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your question. I'll start with the last leg of the question of why would the bid be rejected. Now, before, when you were giving your guidance, like if there's a missing item, then we get from the highest and add for you. Now we are saying if there's a missing item, your bid is what? Is incomplete, and an incomplete bid should be rejected. So we are saying if there's an error that where in financial comparison under the evaluation regulations, like you were said, we were giving that guidance of how to correct the errors. Now that provision of correcting the errors has been removed. So there's no more correction of the what? Of the errors. In consultancy services, it has clearly come out that if it is the error is there, the bid should be disqualified. Again, I emphasize the law is not static. Jonathan, this has already been amended in the regulations. That procedure of correcting the errors has been removed. And I emphasize, let us see how this is working. If we see there's a lot of challenges both on the contractor side and the NT side, because we're already receiving the feedback even before we start implementing, it's very easy. We can issue guidance in form of a circular, we can amend, but we need to first see how it is working. We haven't implemented it. People are just creating scenarios of what if this happens. But there's something that we were trying to cure, of people quoting law. Then if they are lucky, the committee doesn't see it, then they cause variations. Or the committee sees it, they correct. Remember, they've already had the other bidders' prices, so they accept depending on what the other one had quoted, they are within, so they can pass. But when they put it intentionally, but in this era of electronic bid submission of EGP, we are hoping that if you're doing your things online on the system, that there should not be an error unless it is intentional. But let's see how it works. And again, best practice will dictate how we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sheila. Mr. Jonathan, I hope that was to your satisfaction. We also have another hand up. That is Mr. Samuel Senkindu. Mr. Mike Seronkuma, please help me unmute Mr. Samuel so that we can hear from him.
Thank you very much. This has been a really, really good presentation and a good discussion. I would like to add to the previous speaker. In my view, I think the arithmetic error issue is a good initiative because we have always had a suspicion that it is used to rig some people out or in. What we feel is that some people come and deliberately do arithmetic errors and get the lowest bid. Then later when they're evaluating, they smuggle in bids which are compliant. And for example, if I have a gap of, let's say, 1 billion, and I can still increase the figure to 1 billion and still have the winning bid, I correct the deliberate arithmetic error. I add maybe 1 billion to my bid, but I still remain the lowest bid. So that is where the challenge is. If it was transparent, for example, and you advertise maybe all the financials. You say we have opened the financials, let everyone see what is in here. And then when corrections are done, it is transparently distributed to everyone. That would be good. But from what we see, it's like someone deliberately underprices. Then when they go to the actual finalizing and formalizing evaluation, they are allowed to smuggle in a new bid and redoctor their thing so that they are still the lowest, but they have increased the price. Because sometimes someone can deliberately be the lowest, but when he gets the job, it will actually be a lossy job for him, and he makes big losses. So it is also sometimes not advantageous for you to just quote the lowest price because you'll get the job and fail to do the job. So this arithmetic error thing is good in that it will weed out people who deliberately underquote and hope to increase during the evaluation process. That's my personal opinion. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. I don't think that was a question. It was just him supplementing. Now we also have this issue of errors seems to be the focus in this discussion. In the chat room, there is Mr. Hudson saying, if all bids have errors, will the procurement process be rebound? What I seem to be getting from our participants is most of them seem to be of the view that it's almost impossible to make a perfect bid. So Ms. Sheila, if all bids have errors, will the procurement process be rebound?
Yes, if all the bids have arithmetic errors, we shall have to retain just like if we were to evaluate and all the bidders we are getting are not meeting our qualifications, we would have to do what? To retain and start the process afresh. So simply to answer your question, yes, we would go back. If we are going back, we could use a different a different method of procurement, because then we would have lost time. So then the circumstances after that would dictate how we move, but we would definitely have to retender because the people we are getting would all be disqualified. I submit.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Sheila. In the chat, I see in the chat there's Mr. Okay, Julius's question has already been answered by UNAPSEC Secretariat, that he was asking if a recording of this session will be shared. That is why we've been requesting everyone to submit their email, their company name, and any other contacts they deem necessary, because we want to send the recording of this webinar and also the presentation that Ms. Sheila has made to your emails after this webinar. Now let's go. I saw Mr. Jonathan Tugume has his hand up. Yes,
Yes,
Jonathan.
thank you. Thank you very much, even for the response. And it's good that this matter had been discussed earlier. But you see, why it is creating a lot of traffic is because bidding is a very expensive process. So we don't want it to be underplayed, of course, by a regulation like this existing. As you know, whereas you're trying to cure the problem of fishy bidders who are allowing for errors to go up or down so that they win, the PPDA executive did not address the suggestion that this should be considered under materiality. So instead of eliminating the bid because it has an error, you go back to the materiality, material deviation clauses and qualify it from there. So the guideline should not stay like this. I think it's not worth waiting for a whole year for us to see that this doesn't work. You see, this is already rolling. But under materiality, material clause, substantial deviations or material deviations of the bid, you're able to say that this bid was adjusted and it changed the, I'm going to look for that clause. I think it was either World Bank guidelines for procurement. If your bid's arithmetic correction causes a change in a word, then it is material. In other words, then there's no motive for this problem. So, because if I have a material, an error, that because of that error, the contract came to me, then that was a material deviation and your bid can then be rejected. But not every small error should reject a bid. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jonathan. Michelle, do you want to respond to that? Do you have any response?
Yes, I've noted Jonathan's concerns. Like we said, we'll take it under advisement. Like I've been emphasizing, this is not cast in stone. Even if we are not amending the regulation now, we can issue guidance in form of a circular. And I keep saying we shall go with what works best in terms of practice. So worry not, because like I said, it's already in the regulation. We're not going to go through a whole process of amending the regulation, but guidance can be given. So let's not worry too much about this. If concerns are to that effect, then we shall go back to the drawing board and guidance will be given accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Sheila. Yes, Mr. Mark Nsubuga in the chat room is also talking about the same issue. Arithmetic errors can be a result of decimals which a printed document may not reflect. Should bids now go in Excel format? Mr. Sheila, do you want to respond or your response still stands to the previous comments?
It still stands whichever format, even if it is in Excel or exported to Word or the other way around, it would still suffice. If it is in Excel, it's okay. If you put in Word, it's still okay. So I'm assuming the computation is done in Excel. It would be easier to be done in Excel.
I presume so too. And still, Mr. Chizito is saying acceptable margin of error is a necessity. It can happen to all bids received. So this seems to be, a very touchy issue when it comes to our bidders. Maybe that's something you could go back and look into. I don't see anyone else in the chat room. I don't see any more questions in the chat room. I'm not seeing any hands up. This is the time we should be finishing. Is there anyone else who has any questions, comments, anything before I proceed? I'm going to give it 1 minute before I proceed to the next agenda item. Yes, Cordelia re-emphasized that we should remember to share the contacts of the EGP. We are going to do that. As I saw in the chat room, Cordelia provided his contacts, his email address, his or her email address. I'm not sure which gender this is. And also Mr. Nwamanya Andrew had the same issue. I'm sure Mr. Mike Serunkuma will be reaching out to you after this webinar to make sure that issue is sorted. Yes, please.
The contact has been shared in the room. Everyone can get it. His name is Deus, to the agenda from PPDA, EGP section.
Oh,
the
yes. Oh, yes, I see it. It has been, yes, the contact has been shared in the chat room actually by under UNAP Secretariat. So whoever has an issue with the EGP, please feel free to contact Mr. Deus so that you can get helped in that regard. Now, at this juncture, I'm going to assume everyone else is satisfied. Your questions have been answered. And I'm going to proceed to, there's someone who has just, some companies use, Mr. Samuel Mutongole has said some companies use their sister companies during bidding. This obstructs other bidders. Now, I don't know if this is something PPDA, can control, but maybe you could enlighten us, Ms. Sheila.
Thank you, Mariam. Now, there's a provision in the bidding documents on conflict of interest. Now, if it is a sister company, one of the provisions on conflict of interest is where if there's someone in one company that has power to influence decisions in another company, which would be a case like sister companies, we take that as a conflict of interest. And if it is discovered, both companies would be disqualified. They are not allowed to participate in the same procurement process because you give an impression that there's competition when actually there's no competition because it's actually the same provider. Even if it went to A or B with their sister companies, they would still both benefit. So if it is discovered, both would be disqualified. How would it be discovered? For some people, it's so obvious. They can submit powers of attorney to act for A and B, but when they've submitted them in the names of the same person. How? When A has given powers of attorney to Mariam to act for them, and B has also given powers of attorney to Mariam to act for them. There we can see a clear case of conflict of interest. We look at the shareholders, the directors, we see there's one that is similar in both of them. we see there's a likelihood for one company to influence decisions in another company. So that is how we might tell that these are sister companies, they are related, they are showing an impression of competition when actually there's no competition. So both of them would be disqualified. It is not allowed. I submit.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Sheila. At this juncture, I am going to have to move on to the next agenda item, and it's also the final agenda item. I'm going to invite, this is the vote of thanks and closure. Vote of thanks was supposed to be given by Mr. James Wanolonya, who's the president of UNABSEC. However, he hasn't managed to be with us due to an emergency engagement, and he delegated Mr. Duncan Mwesigwa, who's also a UNABSEC board member, to stand in for him. So, Mr. Duncan Mwesigwa, I invite you to come and give our vote of thanks. You have the floor, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you, Mariam. Please just confirm that I'm audible.
Yes, you are. You're very audible.
Thank you, Mariam, and the Secretariat for putting this together. On behalf of the President, who's been unable to join us due to the emergency he got, the board, management, and members of UNABSEC, 400 plus strong companies that are members of UNABSEC. I would like to thank Sheila for taking us through a very wonderful presentation regarding the amendments to the PPDA Act 2021 that became effective this month. I want also to extend my our heartfelt gratitude to the ED of PPDA, who has been unable to join us, but we know he sent us a very able person, Sheila, and the whole team at PPDA for the work they do. Just to borrow from President Museveni, at some time recently said Uganda etandi somuo mera. I think I could say in similar way, on behalf of UNABSEC, public procurement, genda kutandika kutuwomera. I know we've been doing business, but with a lot of hardship. Now, these amendments have clearly come in to make it a lot simpler for us to participate in public procurement. Remember that our sector we represent contributes 12% to the GDP of this country. We are significant in the operations and survival of this economy of ours. So thank you very much for listening to us. You've demonstrated to us that PPDA has listening ears. We've come to you with our proposals, and you've indeed listened and adjusted your regulations and guidelines. Thank you very much. Like you said before, we operate in an ever-changing environment. Therefore, we don't anticipate that this is the last amendment. Let's see how it goes, like you said, Sheila. We will be coming to you and engaging you more frequently on need for further amendments if need arises based on the environment the factors that will be playing in the environment that we operate in. Please send our warm greetings once again to your team at PPDA, and thank you for the wonderful work you're doing for the country. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mwesigwa Duncan. That was Mr. Mwesigwa Duncan, board member of UNABSEC. I don't think there's anything more I can add to that. I'd just like to say thank you very much to everyone who has managed to attend this webinar. I'm sure we've all learned a lot. We've all got clarifications on so many things, and we are basically appreciative to PPDA. I've also, as pointed out earlier, we've had all members, both UNAPSEC and non-UNAPSEC members joining in on this webinar. And I'm sure you've all benefited and seen what UNAPSEC has been able to do in regards to lobbying and advocacy. So with that, I encourage all the contractors on here who have not yet joined UNAPSEC that this is the way to go. You're very welcome. Please feel free to contact Mr. Mike Serunkuma. He will be able to guide you in that regard so that you can join this family of contractors and we fight for a better environment for our construction companies. Thank you very much. Mr. Mike, I don't know if you have anything to add on to that before we officially close this webinar.
Thank you, Madam Mariam. I have nothing to add since the event has been officially closed already by the board member. Thank you very much.
Okay, I now declare that the webinar officially closed. You may leave at will. Thank you very much.